Welcome everyone to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking to you about The Handmaid's Tale Season 4, Episode 1. It's called Pigs. So full spoilers for the episode, as always. Double meaning in the title, if I ever heard one. Who are the real pigs? Man is the real pigs. That's a play in the old, whenever you're watching a monster movie and the lesson of the story is that man is the real monster. I'm putting the pig spin on it for the purpose of this episode. No, so Handmaid's Tale season 4. Obviously it's a couple of weeks since this debuted, and I think episode 5 is coming out this week because they dropped the first 3 in the one day like they normally do. So first of all, the reason why this is so late is because it was going to be me and Connor, as per usual. Connor is still here doing stuff, but he has a different job. He has a very hectic work schedule, and we were hoping that we would still be able to do the show together. But after a few days after the show came out, it became very clear that watching the 3 that had already released and getting to the rest of the episodes in a timely fashion was going to be basically impossible. So it does mean that for season 4, I am solo. I am flying alone. And hopefully that's not super disappointing to everyone, but we are here today and I'm going to talk about the first episode and slowly catch up. How quickly am I going to catch up? I don't know. I have other shows to do, of course, every week, so I think my hope is to get episode 2 done this week and then just sort of slowly catch back up to where the release schedule is. I'll see what I can do though. But without further ado, this was an interesting one getting into it because I wouldn't describe myself as super excited about season 4. I was kind of not I wasn't like negatively anticipating it, if that's even I wasn't dreading it by any means. But season 3 was a mixed bag. I think season 3, well, there's some good stuff, and the previously on did remind me of some really solid stuff towards the end of the season. But there was definitely that period in the middle, and there was definitely a sense of certain tropes in the show that were starting to feel like that were starting to feel really tropey, and things that were starting to feel cliched because they'd went to the well too often on certain subjects or certain styles of moment. This wasn't even one I think we mentioned when we talked about it last season, but I saw someone making fun of the show a little bit, and it wasn't. I mean, I have no idea like how much the person making fun of it was saying it from a good faith place or just being a dick. But there was kind of a point being made about how many times we've ended an episode with an intense close up of June, and then a remix or a cover of an 80s pop song kicks in, because it has happened quite a bit. And there's nothing wrong with that per se, but you do it enough and it kind of becomes this like, oh, you're just doing the formula now, as opposed to season 1 of this show, which felt so unique and so different and everything felt important and so on and so on. So I was very curious coming into this first episode, okay, how is it going to feel given the big ending of season 3 with getting the kids out, the big kid heist, and where the Waterfords are in Canada, all that stuff. And it's funny because very quickly as I was watching the show, I was remembering some of the things I felt at the end of last season. I was remembering how much I was kind of into the Waterford stuff more perhaps than some of the other stuff, because their reactions to what they were doing to each other and their reactions to what was going on was becoming almost more interesting than anything that June was doing. And they only have one scene in this premiere episode, really, but it's the scene where they find out that this plane, this mass escape of 80 something kids has happened. And the reaction in both of their faces was wonderful. It was priceless. It was a cathartic moment of like, hey, someone just stabbed Gilead right in the heart. And their differing reactions were interesting. Is Serena as upset about this as he is? Doesn't seem like she is. But of course we're into this weird bittersweet thing where they've kind of turned on each other, and she thinks she's being victimized, but everything he's told them about her is pretty damn true, at least from what we expect that he's told her. We've not heard the specific details as of yet, but the summary that we got when she was arrested last season did sound quite accurate to what we know. So But those reactions were good, and then the reaction, of course, to find out that June was behind it. Like Warford's, the look in his face was great. Like that scene was one of the best scenes of the episode. And then the other thing that's still very good about this show is the cinematography, pretty much. Barring one or two small moments, it's still very, very good. You know, when I say one or two small moments, I just mean maybe it's a little overdone for one or two examples, but for the most part of what makes this such an invigorating watch still is, you know, the fancy shots of June looking out through the truck, like just a gap in the boards, and that's the only visual she has of where she is as they're escaping in the truck. And she's very ill at this point, of course, and they get to this farmhouse, which is going to become kind of their safe haven, at least for a time. And a lot of this episode was establishing the status quo and what is this new situation? Where are they? Who's around them? What are they going to do now? What is Mayday as a group, if you want to call them that? What are they going to do now? And I have to admit, I do have things in this episode that I don't like. There is things in this episode that kind of plays into what I was saying, the growing concerns of the show being, you know, I don't want to say dragged out, but it does kind of feel at times like it's spinning its wheels and it wants to have more and more seasons. And we already know there's a season 5. Like, we know there's another season coming after this, so there's not going to be any attempt this season to wrap things up. My hope going into it, of course, is that, you know, the status quo is different enough and that we're exploring new things. But there is definitely a couple of things in this one that left me concerned, and I kind of found myself, because I was really on board with the episode for a good 15-20 minutes, something like that. You know, the glimpses we got of Lawrence, you know, I'm enjoying Bradley Whitford's performance. June walking up to the farm initially and not really being sure if it's 100% safe, and then all the other handmaids running after her afterwards when she falls down. Like, these moments were well done, and I was into it. And it's like, okay, maybe it's never going to feel as special as season 1 again, but this is solid so far. And like I say, the scene with the Waterfords really, you know, making it feel, you know, being the anchor to that, being there's still a lot that this show has to offer. And I'm sure it still does, but there are concerns. One of the things that we've added this season is the character of Miss or Mrs. Keyes, Esther Keyes, played by McKenna Grace. And I'd forgotten she was cast in this, because I remember talking about it in the news when she was cast. And I like this actress. She's been in, this is the oldest I've seen her in anything, because she's like the little Sabrina in a flashback at the start of the Netflix Sabrina show. She was in the Tonya Harding movie with Margot Robbie, which the name I am forgetting at this point in time, but she was the kid version of her, I think, in that movie. She popped up. She's popped up in a number of things, and this was like, okay, she's getting a little bit older now, and she's taking more serious roles, and now she's going to be in The Handmaid's Tale, right? Okay, there's fewer serious roles, you know. There's fewer, more serious roles, I should say, that exist in the world than being on The Handmaid's Tale, given the subject matter, given what they do. And first of all, obviously, you have this, she's the wife of the commander who lives at this place, and immediately, kind of very similar to the start of last season, where it was like, oh, who is Lawrence, what is his situation, can he be trusted, is he a good person? And it turned out to be more complicated than that, where he was involved in Gilead more, and the creation of Gilead, and it was his wife, and this change of heart and the slow thing that built over the season. It was a bit more nuanced than that, and it became arguably more interesting because it wasn't just he's a good person trying to help, but he's a commander, so he's keeping it all secret. This the first scene with her is where the episode started to lose me a little, because it kind of pivoted into, oh, you thought they were out of it, but this new mistress, the new wife, is horrible, just like the last ones, but in a different way. And I was a little bit worried, because she immediately loses her shit at June, because June doesn't have a plan of action. June's not got some sort of mass takedown of Gilead playbook in their back pocket, and because it seems like she wants to take time to heal and let things cool down a little while they're still being, I mean, they're always going to be hunted, but this is right after this big kid heist, which is pointed out in another scene, might literally start a war if Kara doesn't give them the kids back. Like, this might start a war. This might be what June's put in place. So June, understandably, isn't ready to just jump out with mission number 2. Nor does she have one planned as of yet. And this episode, like, the character of Keyes, she immediately, I should say Esther. Keyes is more the commander's name. But Esther, she immediately loses her shit and says, you should have probably just stayed and let them kill you if you weren't going to fight. And she storms out of the scene. And I thought, that was a bit of a weird introduction to this character. I don't know how I feel about her yet. And then, as this is going on, one of the things we see Janine doing is that Janine's befriended a pig on the farm. And a couple of scenes later, they're taking the pig into the barn, and Janine says a prayer with it because they're about to kill the pig for food. And it's this kind of heart-wrenching little scene for Janine. And we see Esther sort of watching it in the background. She's she's got a bit of a sociopath, maybe. She's watching this in the background. And obviously there's more to Esther's character, but at this point in the episode, that's all I really know. And then when they're having dinner, and they're all having dinner together, and all the previous handmaids are all now dressed as Marthas, and that's the cover story. Like, farms have lots of Marthas because there's lots of work to be done. Makes some sense. Janine doesn't want to have any of the pork because it's, it was her pig. It was Mr. Darcy. It was her friend. And Esther kind of loses her shit at this and says, "No, I killed that pig so you could all eat. So I could feed you all, and we clean our plates in this house," and other statements of that sentiment. And she forces Janine to eat. And then when it looks like Janine's going to spit it back out because she's disgusted that she's eaten it, she gets up and puts her hand over Janine's mouth and demands that she not spit it out and that she swallow it. And this scene was just I wasn't sure what to make of this scene at all when I was watching it. I was like, what are we doing with this character? This character, in her 2 scenes thus far, is feeling a little cartoony. And obviously they take it to a very dark place. Like, the scene immediately following this, June, having witnessed this, follows her out and tells her to have some respect, that all of them have suffered, and to show some sympathy and so on. And this was the one thing about it that I kind of liked. It was like, yeah, June, like, tell her to stop being this awful person who thinks because she's technically the wife, she's in charge and she has all of their lives in her hand, kind of thing. But then Esther tells this horrible story about what her experience has been. And we know that the commanders will be given wives who are very young. Like, that's something we've seen previously on the show. And that this old man commander got Esther, and because he couldn't perform, he basically, I don't know if the word pimped is correct in this term. I don't know if he was charging, as it were, but he would essentially force her on, or force other people on her. So other guardians, eyes, whoever. And she describes this, and she's kind of dancing around the terminology a little bit until she actually finally drops an F-bomb, and it kind of escalates, and June kind of realizes the trauma she's been through and sort of reconsiders her anger and sits down and has more of a heart-to-heart with her. And again, I wasn't really feeling this scene. And I think one of the things that the show has maybe a problem with now is that everything in season 1 was so shocking. Everything was so depressing and shocking, and you felt this like awful feeling inside you the entire time, and it was so well directed to go along with all these ideas. But we were being introduced to everything, and it was like, okay, this world is established. And part of the problem with it going seasons and seasons is the idea that they have to kind of almost top the misery porn, if you want to call it that. And I really felt it in this scene. I really felt this, we're going to have an underage girl tell this story. And it's not that it doesn't fit in Gilead. It's not that it doesn't fit into the context of what we already know about Gilead. But there are certain things where the show has almost made me numb to them trying to like milk it for drama and shock reveals and the horribleness of what she's telling June here. And it'd be one thing just on its own, because I thought after this scene, maybe this is just okay, like she's sort of become acquainted as to why she does have this rage in her, why she wants to help fight back, why she needs to feel like she's doing something, and she is ultimately still a child, and that's why she's acting like such a little shit, because she doesn't know how to cope with her feelings, and arguably in this world, the adults don't even know how to cope with their goddamn feelings. I mean, that's what the show's been about for the last 3 seasons. But she's acting out in these really aggressive ways. She's and some of it you can track and you can sort of make sense of it. I don't necessarily think that makes any of the scenes that entertaining to watch, because a lot of them do come across as cartoony. Instead of, maybe I'm misremembering things, but I feel like in the earlier days of the show, when they introduced like a heavy concept, or they were introducing like this really heavy idea of what a handmaid was, or what happened to them every month, of how they were raped every month, everything was sort of treated with this methodical pace of how it dished out the information. It didn't just like hurl you to the deep end in a way. It made you feel the dread, so that by the time they actually said something out loud, you were already thinking what it was for a long time. It let you kind of come to these conclusions to some extent. And I'm not saying that you can't have the shock thing, but the problem with this show is that we've had so much shock things. We've been living in this horrible world where all the worst things possible have already came up, pretty much, that this just kind of felt like they were trying to top themselves. And the imagery of later, I think, kind of added to this, which is ultimately that they catch a guardian who stumbles drunk onto the grounds, or so we hear anyway. We don't see this. This is what we hear. But they've got this guy outside. And this is right after June is considering killing the commander, because now she's seeing him again. She saw him once briefly when she didn't know anything about him, and now she knows what he did to her, what did to Esther, and he seems to be senile. He seems to not really know what's going on anymore, which is why Esther maybe has so much control and is using this place as a safe haven for Mayday. But then they've got this guardian, and some of the lines of dialogue from Esther clearly indicate that this is one of the men that the commander allowed to like rape her. And June realizes this. He tries to run away. They all start hitting him with things, and she says, "No, put him up in the barn." And they take him in the barn, notably in, I think, the exact same pen of the barn where the pig was earlier. I think it's the exact same location, which the symbolism is, it's there. And they have him tied up, and she says, you've betrayed your country, and specifically says United States here, not Gilead. And, the sentence for that is death. You raped a child, the sentence for that is death. And hands the blade, the Chekhov's blade, which was, teased throughout, because she, Esther had it in her hand at the start of the emotional scene earlier. June had it when she almost killed the commander, or was considering it at the very least. And then here, she hands this blade back to Esther, and sort of makes her feel like she can do her part, and gives her revenge. And like, there's a lot of drama in here that I can sort of see the theory of. I can see the theory of June recognizing what this girl needs, and while this would be completely absurdly unhealthy in any other context, then maybe in the world where they're all on the run in Gilead, this is what she needs. She needs soldiers, she needs people who are willing to do this. If she is going to fight some resistance, or be some resistance and fight back, she needs people. She needs people who can do this. But I think we do leap to it a little bit. I think in order to get to this point by the end of the first episode, they had to sell us on her horrible past. They had to sell us they had to give us almost a swerve of her seemingly being awful, like some of the other wives have been, but then subverting it into, oh no, she is like one of the biggest victims we've met, so therefore we have to, we should sympathize with her. And then sort of the dark, almost, Breaking Bad-esque thing again. Because this is the thing with June, is that June, as the show has went on, is not unsympathetic. She's always sympathetic because the goals are always admirable and on the side of good. But there is very much a Walter White-esque thing happening with her, where she's losing her humanity. Which isn't it isn't unfair. Like, why? Of course she's losing her humanity. Look at where she is. I'm not critiquing that that's necessarily the wrong thing to be doing, but what I'm critiquing in this episode, though, because this is me I'm saying the drama in theory works. The problem is that it has to rush through the introduction of the girl, making us think she's awful, subverting that into her being sympathetic because she has this dark past and she's a victim, more, just as much of a victim as anyone else, perhaps more because she was a child. And then, having this big passing of the torch, or in this case, knife, and having her kill this guardian. But honestly, the worst scene of the episode for me, by far, is the final scene. I hated the final scene. After this, June, who's sort of nursing a gunshot wound the whole time, they mentioned that she also died. She almost died, and she's been struggling with that. She goes back to her room that she's staying in. She lies in the bed, and in walks Esther, who's got her, her green wives outfit covered in blood, and she wants to lie next to June, and asks if this is okay, and June says yes, and she says, "I love you." And this is not romantic. Let me make this clear. Like, for anyone who's listening to me talking about this and they've not watched the show, let's make this clear. This is not a romantic thing she's doing. This is a very, it's a very motherly. She's becoming a surrogate daughter, is what is ultimately the point here. Because June's final line of the episode is she says, "I love you, banana," as she's staring at not at the camera, but effectively, and before she finally smiles and they cut to the credits. And I kind of hated this final scene because it felt convoluted for the symbolism. It felt convoluted because they wanted her to lie in bed next to her for the image of her lying there covered in blood next to June, and them finding some sort of solace in this. They want to sell June as going down a darker path of becoming this kind of freedom fighter who has has the guts, I don't know, has the stomach to do what needs to be done to win the war, effectively, right? They're going down that path, and like that's what this is. June walks away, and it's this, and it does these little things which I appreciate from a craft point of view. Like when June gives her the knife and leaves her to kill the guardian, she walks out the barn almost in the same way that she walked out with Janine when the pig was being killed. So again, the symbolism between the two scenes and the symmetry is there. There's a lot of that going on. But I did feel myself rolling my eyes in the final scene because I didn't really buy it. It felt like it was jumping to this conclusion that I didn't buy that we were there already. And I'm not saying that it has to, because there's probably, I've heard people, some of the early reviews who'd seen either the whole season or at least a significant chunk of the season had said that the first few episodes were maybe spinning the wheels a bit too much. And I can see how in some ways it's maybe going to feel like that if we're just hanging out on this farm and whatever else we're going to be doing for the next few episodes. But I think this relationship between the two of these characters feels rushed to me. And I don't... And I think because it's been rushed, I do think that Esther has severely been hampered by this truncation of fairly major beats to her character that probably should have played out better. I mean, honestly, I would have probably preferred them to be more subtle with like her aggressive sides in the first half of the episode. I think putting her hand over Janine's mouth, like just losing her shit. Like I get that like she's still a child and they want her to still kind of act like a child, and I understand that, but it did kind of feel like, oh, this is a different type of brand of evil wife that we've not seen before. You thought Serena Joy was bad. Here's a 14-year-old or something. I felt like a kind of a disconnect to that immediately, and there was definitely moments in season 3 that I had similar feelings to them overplaying certain things, even when other elements were still really strong, because the cinematography for the most part is really strong. It still looks great, but I really wasn't feeling the Esther June relationship, and I think that is a big warning sign right now, because I think it's fair to assume that that's probably going to be a major driving force for the whole season. It feels like this first episode's A-plot is that relationship, and I don't imagine that they're doing that in episode 1 because it's not going to be a huge deal and maybe the central backbone of the entire goddamn storyline of the show this season. So we'll see how that goes. I'm not super excited about it. I kind of feel like stop trying to shock us more. Stop trying to outshock the previous shocks. At this point, I don't need that, and I think subtlety goes a long way. And I think I don't know if this show was ever subtle, but it felt way more subtle than this at the point. There was a way it's told its stories, and I think here, less would have been more. I think the implication, like, what if we didn't hear about the exactly what she went through, or the idea that when she says something that accuses this guy in front of her, when she says this is one of them who did this to me, would that have been a better moment if up until this point we didn't know for sure that's what had happened? And maybe this moment was that realization. And we could have felt a rush of things, and maybe we'd have felt caught up in the emotions that they were at the time. The fact that this happened in the same episode is hearing about her past and what the commander put her through, and then we randomly run into one of these guys at the end of the episode. It's one of those TV convoluted things that kind of takes me out of the moment, where I feel a disconnect because it feels like you're cheating in a weird way. And a lot of this plot between the two of them felt that way to me. So I'm not sold on this. As far as other plots go, I did think the scene with Aunt Lydia was both I'm really conflicted on this scene. On the one hand, I like Lydia's side of it. I like Lydia's moments where she has to bite her tongue because she's clearly been questioned and tortured for weeks because of it was all the handmaids under her authority that were part of this mass as they see it, kidnapping, and she is still very loyal. She's still saying all the right things she's supposed to say. But there's a moment when they say that they considered her frailty, when they decided to stop torturing her, where she has to bite her tongue. You can see it, and it's a good little moment for her. It's a really good little character beat and a good moment of acting from Ed Dowd. Good stuff. But then the other part of the scene that I'm not super hot on is just the overall tone from the Gilead side of things, where it kind of I think in the past I've often talked about moments in this show feeling like, oh, this is kind of like this type of scene from this type of story, but it's very different because it's in The Handmaid's Tale, right? This scene here, I don't think it's like a scene from something else. I don't think it's Handmaid's Tale's version of a scene from something else. It just is that scene, and that scene is the evil villain organization saying they're going to go after the heroes and track them down and blah blah blah. Every time it cut back to the guy who was speaking on the council for Gilead, I got typical almost B-movie levels of yes, we're evil and we're going to hunt the good guys and we're going to take them down. And so I did get a little bit of conflict with this scene for myself, in terms of I felt like it, as the show goes on, it's kind of gradually losing its unique world and tone and feel, and it's becoming more and more of a normal thing in a weird way. And not so much that the extreme concepts of the show aren't still there, but just that the way it feels when you're watching, the way it feels, there was such an oppressive tone to season one, and you felt trapped in that world. Watching this, I just feel like I was watching something where I'm like, the bad guys, not monologuing, but making his claim. We've got the evil V for Vendetta-esque council talking about keep maintaining control and whatever. I thought the Lawrence and Nick stuff was alright though. I think Lawrence waiting, expecting to be executed for his part and involvement in anything that's went on in season 3, his kind of acceptance of it, Nick being a little tongue-tied. He goes to say thank you for your for your service to Gilead, but Lawrence keeps talking to him, and ultimately is like, hey, you should probably talk them out of going to war. Like, we might be able to make some proper diplomatic movements if we sort of don't pursue that, and millions will die if you do. And you know what? This is going to be Jun's legacy. This was Jun that put all this in motion, and that kind of stops Nick in his tracks, and he has to really consider what he's saying. And he just repeats the phrase, "Thank you for your service," blah blah. But when he comes back the next day, and Lawrence thinks he's being killed, he's taken to a room with a chair, and it's very ominous looking. It turns out, of course, just to be a chair so he can get cleaned up, get a shave, because Nick has convinced the council that he still has value in his strategic know-how, and they want him to be in the room talking about the possible invasion tactics. Because that's right, they might be trying to invade Canada to get their children back. That is the level of which they care about the fact that 80 plus kids have been taken. I thought these things were solid. They're not like episode carriers by any means, but I thought the performances from both actors were good, and I am somewhat intrigued as a B plot there. Like I say, I love the Waterford scene. I thought that was great. I love the idea of seeing the effect that Jun's legend and that she is causing this much trouble, and seeing it thrown in their faces. It's particularly Fred. It is very satisfying, and it's not that I just want to have satisfying things from this show anymore. I'm down for the story to still make it challenging, still make it this, and that's part of maybe what I liked about the June and the Handmaid stuff in this episode was, some of them feeling like, oh, we can party in the barn, we've got like a little safe haven, maybe this is as free as we're ever going to get. And June's like, no, like this is not free. We're not really free yet. Like we there's still a fight to be had, and I think that's interesting to me. I'm not so sure that June making Esther her surrogate daughter and training her to be like, June 2.0 and willing to kill the bad guys is, at least the way they've presented it so far, it's not that appealing to me. So I'll see what episode 2 brings, and if I feel any better about it going forward. But yeah, I have mixed feelings on this first episode by quite a bit, and I think that what's more concerning, based on, because I had a lot of mixed feelings in the middle of season 3, although there was some solid stuff at the start and definitely at the end. I do think that it's more concerning when the first episode and what it's introducing for the season I'm not feeling, because that could be just a problem the whole time. It may be something that doesn't turn around, but I'm hoping that maybe we'll develop the character of Esther a little bit more, and I'll get more on board with it. But I really, the final 5 minutes felt, and I hate to say this, I really hate to say this, but it felt try hard. It felt like it was trying desperately to make me care and give me the symbolism, and I don't think they earned it. And I think that's the difference. I think, Handmaid's Tale at its best was, not only did it earn the symbolism, it was letting the symbolism sort of tell you the story. But at this point, we've already, like, we know so much about this character, we know this world, we know all these things. I don't think you can rely on that in the same way that we did before. I think symbolism still has a place, but it has to be there in a place for the characters to advance and move into new things. And I suppose technically the idea of June having like her war daughter, effectively, the war version of a daughter, is interesting, and she can be there for in a very specific way that she never maybe thought she could before. The idea that with her own experience, she can give this girl guidance, that she can be there to see her through this and give her some sort of happier ending. But it's not clicking for me yet, and it felt like it really wanted me to like be into this at the end. And I'm not necessarily saying it wanted me to root for the relationship and root for like this is a happy thing necessarily, because what she's just had her do is very dark, and I don't think the show wants me to feel like it's just, oh, happy days, she's got a companion now, she's got a child figure who she can bond with, and that's going to be sweet and whatever. I don't think it's trying to do that by any means. I don't think that's what it wants to make me feel. But all I could really feel was kind of like, I don't know. I wasn't feeling it. So there you go. That's episode 1 of season 4 of Handmaid's Tale. So if you were waiting for a couple of weeks for the first review to go up and you love the episode so far, then I'm sorry that this one was as fairly negative as it was. The production value is still solid, and the cinematography is largely still great. The actors are generally very, very strong because they have been throughout, and there's some interesting stuff in there. But I have to admit, I'm not super excited right now. So I hope episode 2, 3, 4, so on can pick me back up. But let me know what you thought of episode 1 of season 4 in the comments below. You can like and subscribe, all that stuff. So to like and subscribing, is a simple and free way to support everything we do. And let us know you like it, but also help us find more audience, so please do that. You can also support us financially over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV for as little as $1 per more, and get some bonuses for your troubles. But otherwise, that is me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?